Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some monster news for this Nebraska program coming out of the recruiting trail, as Nebraska was already supposed to host a monster recruiting weekend over the next couple of days. It gets a whole lot bigger with five-star offensive tackle David Sanders Jr. also expected to make the trip up to Lincoln, Nebraska. The Nebraska fans who've been rocking with the fellas over the summer, David Sanders Jr., at least in my mind, is one of the most impressive offensive tackle prospects we've seen really in the last 4 or 5 cycles. And for Nebraska to assert themselves really right into the thick of it for David Sanders Jr., I think that tells you a little bit about the buzz that Matt Rhule is creating around this Nebraska program as it relates to the high school recruiting trail. We obviously saw them flip Dylan Rhule late in the process. You're looking at Matt Rhule just consistently getting these top players on campus in Lincoln, Nebraska. And we all know how special of a place Lincoln, Nebraska is. As much as you can get these guys on campus, you are going to have a very good shot at getting these kids committed. And you look at David Sanders Jr., this is a guy that when he put Nebraska in his top 4, I'll raise my hand and say I was skeptical. Now that he's taken another visit to Nebraska where he had the choice to go to any program he wanted over this weekend, deciding to come to Nebraska, I think that tells us a little bit about where David Sanders Jr. is as it relates to Nebraska. He's going to visit Tennessee and Nebraska over the weekend. I want to get into David Sanders Jr., but also talk about 2 other prospects in the 2025 class that it sounds like Nebraska certainly has a shot with in this cycle. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, to the Nebraska fans, whether we're talking 2024, whether we're talking the recruiting trail. I can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into David Sanders Jr. first. He is no doubt kind of headlining this recruiting weekend for Nebraska. You know, we've talked extensively about David Sanders Jr. This kid checks, just about every box that you want in an offensive tackle prospect at 6'6", 290. He carries that 290 pounds exceptionally well. He's the best athlete at the offensive tackle position in this 2025 class. The play strength is extraordinary, and he's a polished offensive lineman too. This is a guy that once you get 10, 15 more pounds on his frame, which you certainly could do, I think this is a multi-year starter, potential All-American at that left tackle spot. At the end of the day, guys like David Sanders Jr., they don't really grow on trees. 6'6" with 36-inch arms and the athleticism that he has, it doesn't get any better than David Sanders Jr. Now, Nebraska's going up against Ohio State, going up against Georgia and Tennessee. Now, I kind of always thought that Georgia was going to be the team that was going to win out for David Sanders Jr., kind of just lurking in the background. It sounds like this one might be coming down to Nebraska and Tennessee. Because you look at David Sanders Jr., the situation he was in was he has this weekend to go to any single program he wants on a visit. He chose Tennessee and he chose Nebraska. Ohio State was the team to watch a couple of weeks ago. I think the team to watch now is certainly this Nebraska program, and at least kind of how I look at this recruitment, getting him on campus one more time, getting him in front of Matt Rhule, the rest of the staff. Obviously, Dylan Rhule and him are very, very good friends from the time that Dylan Rhule was at Georgia. It's only going to help. Like, Matt Rhule's best asset on the recruiting trail is the relationships. Getting him another opportunity to have him and his family up to Lincoln, Nebraska, I think that's absolutely massive. And the chances of Nebraska landing David Sanders Jr., I am fascinated to kind of hear the intel that comes out of these 2 trips he has to Tennessee and Nebraska. At least in my mind, I kind of was skeptical about how much Nebraska was in for with David Sanders Jr. My skepticism is no longer there. Nebraska, I think, certainly in it for 5-star offensive tackle David Sanders Jr. Now, the next one I want to talk about, and should not really be overshadowed by David Sanders Jr., is Michael Terry III, another 5-star prospect from San Antonio, Texas. One of, if not the most fascinating prospects in this 2025 class. Michael Terry III could play, I think, legitimately 6 positions on the football field. And you go to the high school film, he is all over the field, whether he's playing tight end, whether he's playing wide receiver, whether he's playing running back. I think could be an elite safety linebacker or edge rusher, kind of depending on how that body continues to develop. Kind of how we talked about someone like Carter Nelson. These type of kids they don't grow on trees. I mean, 6'3", 217 pounds, runs a 10.8 in the 100-meter dash. You take a look at the high school numbers, had 90 carries for over 800 yards, 14 touchdowns, also had 31 catches for 436 yards. For Michael Terry, it sounds like Oregon's in it. It sounds like Texas is in it. And it sounds like Nebraska is in it. And we've always talked about Matt Rhule really succeeding with these kind of players, just to freak athletes. And I think what Matt Rhule needs to pitch to Michael Terry is kind of a clear outline of what the plan is for Michael Terry III. This is a guy that, again, could play 5 or 6 different positions once he gets to the college football landscape. I think the kind of the job for all 3 of these programs are, kind of selling a clear outlook for Michael Terry. You make no mistake about it, whatever position that he decides to play at the college football level, he certainly is going to excel in. But I think for Matt Rhule, Nebraska, you got to sell him on, hey, we see as this kind of guy, and kind of giving him the choice as well, but kind of selling the future and the vision for Michael Terry, because it's a kind of murky outlook in terms of what position he's going to play, because he's a little tall to play running back, played a lot of running back at the high school level, little undersized to play tight end, but it certainly looks like a great tight end at the high school frame. Big wide receiver. I could certainly see him kind of being a kind of Carter Nelson-like, and that might be a conversation that Matt Rhule has with Michael Terry III. Say, hey, look at what we're doing with Carter Nelson. We're going to find a way to get him on the field as a true freshman. We're going to do the exact same with you. You're going to be a difference maker for Nebraska. We're going to figure out a way to get you on the football field. Last 2025 recruit I want to talk about is Isaiah Mose from Lee Summit, Missouri. This is one of my favorite wide receivers in the 2025 cycle. We broke down his film when he committed to Oregon. I think the big storyline here is, one, Nebraska was in for it with Isaiah Mose. Now he commits to Oregon. Nebraska goes out and hires his pops. So his pops is now on the Nebraska staff, and he's going to take a visit to Nebraska this weekend. And Isaiah Mose is the kind of guy that you just want to get the football into his hands and let him cook. I don't think there's many better wide receivers in terms of yards after the catch and working with the football in their hands better than Isaiah Mose. And we kind of talk about, hey, Nebraska is continuing to try to find difference makers on the offensive side of the football to manufacture those explosive plays. It gets really easy to manufacture explosive plays when you have a guy like Isaiah Mose in your offense, whether it's end arounds, whether it's screens, whether it's swing passes. You get the football in his hands, good things are normally going to happen. Monster recruiting weekend for Nebraska. I think these kids choosing to come to Nebraska, and Isaiah Mose could have gone to Saturday Night Lights with the Oregon Ducks. They have a massive recruiting weekend going down. He chooses to come to Nebraska. Michael Terry could have gone to Texas. He's coming to Nebraska. David Sanders Jr. coming to Nebraska. If you're a Nebraska fan, you have to be fired up about just the amount of buzz that Matt Rhule is creating on the recruiting trail. Now, are you going to land all 3 of these prospects? I don't know. They might have a chance to, but just seeing them get these caliber guys country, that's what stands out to me the most. Creating a lot of buzz around this program. If Nebraska can go out, win 8-9 games, watch out for Matt Rhule on the recruiting trail. We'll close it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. We'll talk to y'all later.